My name is DJ Swivel. I'm a Grammy award-winning producer, mixer, and songwriter. I've been making records professionally for 19 years. I think I've sold 200 million records and have 70 platinum, diamond records. I've worked across all genres, artists like Beyoncè, JayZ, Kanye, Rihanna, the Chainsmokers, BTS, Rema, Selena Gomez. And yeah, and I make music and I love tech and I love the tools that allow us to create and make magic.
Wonderful, cool. So, and recently you went into Atmos, I heard.
Yeah, I mean, I've been mixing in Atmos for a number of years, actually. I've been mixing in Atmos for probably at least 3 years. Was it before the pandemic? Yeah, it might have been maybe 4 years I've been mixing in Atmos.
Okay.
And you know, bit of a learning curve. The original process that I would use to mix in Atmos was the Dolby Atmos sort of renderer, and so you have to, like, I work in Pro Tools. You have to sort of change your playback engine. You have to open up a second bit of software, and these two softwares have to communicate. It was a bit of a convoluted process, and it was a bit of a challenge to sort of wrap your head around. And there was always something wrong with the process in it communicating. So, you know, Thomas built an amazing product in the Atmos Composer, and it's just like been a much simpler process since using it. I've now mixed 2 records using it, and I've only been on it for maybe a month now, and yeah, and it's just been a breeze.
So which records were that? Possible to mention?
Well, so one is a new record for an artist named Ozuna, who's a very big Latin artist. I can't tell you the name of the song yet, but it's done, approved, and coming soon. He just shot the video. And the other one is a record for Lil Nas X called Need That Boy, and we did the Atmos mix for that. So, yeah.
And so what's your workflow then? So you come up with the stereo mix first, you use Pro Tools, right?
Yeah, in some cases, for the Ozuna record, I mix the stereo and then also mix the Atmos. So I create the stereo mix. Once it's approved, done, mastered, print the stems, and then I take those stems, import it into a new session, my Atmos session, and then build the mix that way. In the case of Lil Nas X, the stereo mix was already done. They just hired me to make the Atmos. So again, working off of stems, bring the stems in and be able to mix. And so what was really easy about the process with the composer is you just put the composer on your sort of your master channel, and then you put the beam track across all of your mix channels, and then they speak to one another, and you can do your entire mix in the composer. You don't even have to use your DAW. It's like literally in the composer. Yeah. So I can do all my panning, all my sort of like spatial movement, and anything I need to do right in that composer. Or you can open up the individual beams and do your panning there, and it's just an easy process. And then when you want to print the mix, well, actually, even before you print, it also has sort of the ability to add, you know, dynamic processing into the composer. So you can add a compressor, in this case Gravitas, the one that Thomas built, and now, you know, what was typically somewhat difficult to do an Atmos mastering, you can kind of do some Atmos mastering, or at least like some bus compression, you know, across your 128 channels. And then when you're done with that, you can just print it right in Pro Tools. And it's easy. Your file comes out. You don't have to use any secondary sort of bouncing. You don't have to sort of print to tape, so to speak, the way that the renderer, you know, typically likes to be used. Yeah, so it's just a much easier workflow. It's easier. I've always found Atmos to be somewhat complex and confusing for people your average engineer to like pick up. It's not intuitive. You have to really learn it.
Yeah.
And this makes it a lot more intuitive. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Have you checked out Spacelab as well in conjunction with the Atmos Composer?
I have not used Spacelab, primarily because I'm not starting a mix in Atmos. Spacelab is the reverb, and I'm not really working with any of the reverb or sort of like that sort of spatial stuff. I really care more about the panning, and all of the stems that I receive already have their reverb processed into them. So I'm not typically going that far as to start remixing the song in Atmos. And what I found, a lot of artists tend to, they just want their mix placed in a new space. but they don't want to change the mix. And so I haven't really found a need to go into the reverb side of things. Although, you know, clearly a lot of use in film and TV, and if you're mixing directly to Atmos from your source audio, then of course tons of reason to use it there.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Yeah. And so, if you would, say a verdict regarding well, Dolby Atmos in general, how people consume it, how it's accepted in the market, how important it is now for a producer to do also a Dolby Atmos mix, and what do you think is the main situation where fans and listeners consume Dolby Atmos? Is it headphones or?
Yeah, I think primarily listeners are listening in headphones. I mean, my experience with Atmos has been really Apple pushing the format primarily so that they can share this new format and with this new technology paired to their headphones, right? So that's where I think most people are using it. Although I know a lot of cars, my vehicle has an Atmos sort of setting in the vehicle where you can listen to the Atmos versions. And I know more and more vehicles are incorporating the technology. And so I think it's one of those. It's just a new way of listening to audio. And so I don't think it certainly doesn't replace stereo, but it adds another dynamic, another layer, another option. So if you are looking for a more immersive sound and you want to hear sound all around your head and all around your body in a more three-dimensional way, Atmos is a great way to achieve that. And I think it's just going to be a preference thing. Some listeners are going to want to hear the more spatial version of the mix, and some will just want to hear the traditional stereo. And so, having both formats is useful.
Yeah. And do you consider it to become like your go-to thing whenever you do anything? You will also do automatically the Dolby Atmos mix, or just occasionally when it's requested or so?
Yeah. Well,
what do you think?
Primarily, the need is that record companies are now required to deliver Atmos. So if you're working with any of the major record labels, they are required to deliver Atmos mixes as part of their mandate. They've taken a lot of money from Apple and through that are sort of obligated to deliver Atmos, at least to some extent. I'm not sure if every project is delivering Atmos, but a lot of them are. And so there was a lot of work for the first few years doing back catalog stuff. Now it seems to be more of the forward catalog things. And so there's definitely a need for it and a necessity. As far as for me, I tend to work with more major labels. I mean, I work with independent artists also. I haven't found that independent artists are really asking for it. They're primarily focused on stereo mixing. But I suspect that will change as more adoption takes place and more technology exists, more headphones and more affordable options and things like that. As more adopters are listening to it, there will be a higher and higher need for independent creators to deliver those mixes as well.
Yeah, and do you think that the independent creators are a little bit hesitant yet, just because of the big investment that's usually involved with Atmos? If you go for the, we call it the traditional way with, big speaker setups and things like this. Because with the composer, it could be a pretty straightforward thing because basically you could do it on a laptop.
Yeah, and I do it on a laptop. In fact, I actually have a thesis. I mix Rema's entire album in Atmos, including "Calm Down," which was one of the biggest songs last year, the year before. And what we did is I mixed the entire project binaurally in headphones at home in my home studio. And then we booked Capitol Studios in Hollywood. They have a beautiful Atmos room for 2 days, just to review all the mixes in context and make sure that they're all good. Rema flew into LA, we did it together, and remarkably, there was very little changes from where I got to it in headphones. And I think that comes down to understanding the format and understanding where you're placing things. And when I first started, there was a learning curve, and I didn't quite know exactly where to place things and how to do it. I think I've solved that, and now I have my formula for what an Atmos mix should sound like. And so for me, mixing in headphones makes a lot of sense. It does lower the cost, but there is still an additional cost. And I think typically with independent creators, if they're already funding the cost for a mix, to add this additional cost for a second format mix can sometimes be prohibitive. And so I think, but it's also something that a lot of people can learn, because actually mixing in Atmos is not that complex. Once you have your setup, you have your template, you have the equipment you need, you got your composer, learning how to spatially pan it becomes an artistic choice and a preference, but it's not actually the most difficult thing in the world to solve. And so I think perhaps a lot of artists might want to explore even doing their own Atmos mixes. It's definitely, it's an easier learning curve. If you're working from finished mixed stems, it's a much easier learning curve, because you don't have to worry about the correction and the ear training. It's just creatively, where do you want things to sit? And that's a much easier thing for a mixer, especially a young mixer, young artist who's learning how to mix, to accomplish at a reasonably high level.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for your experiences and your view on the whole Dolby Atmos thing, and about the work with your
Thanks for chatting with me.
Dolby Atmos Composer. And looking forward to a lot of new projects.
Of course.
From your side. And hello to Thomas Fiedler from the NAMM Show.
What's up, Thomas?
Thank you for all these amazing tools. Take care. Bye.
See ya.